Lance is by far the most iconic champion to ever appear, besides Cynthia of course, but even then Lance is probably a very well-known character in the anime and in the game. However, what if instead of facing Lance, the Dragon Master, you were instead faced with Iron Knight? Well, in this video, I'm going to be answering that question, as in this video, we're going to be talking, now what if I was the Pokemon champion? In this video, I'll be talking about what my team would be, what my ace would be, what their abilities, items, etc, etc. So without further ado, let's get this video started. Now, before I get into the main point of the video, I just want to say something, is that there will be some rules that I will be following. For instance, I'm not allowed to use but like later generation evolutions. For instance, I can use Gligar but not Gliscor, because Gliscor was introduced in Gen 4. But the battle mechanics will be Gen 9. So I can use their so for instance, if I'm using Gliscor, I can use his Gen 9 move pulse. So that will make this video way more interesting, and I'll also be giving them held items to make it a bit more challenging. That way, if you just want to nerf me, you can just take away the items, or just, you know, make some tweaking onto my team. And without further ado, let's get into the video now. Booyah! First up is my ace. Now, every champion has an ace Pokemon. Lance, of course, has Dragonite, Cynthia has Garchomp, Steven Stone has Metagross. So, I need a ace Pokemon. Now, there were a lot of really strong and good Pokemon in Johto and Kanto that it could be ace Pokemon. However, I want something different. I want my ace Pokemon to be terrifying and very strong looking. For instance, Garchomp is terrifying, Dragonite not as much, but still pretty threatening. Metagross is also very threatening. So I want a Pokemon that not only is strong, but is also looks threatening and looks like a beast. And I've got the perfect Pokemon for you. That Pokemon is, of course, none other than Tyranitar. Tyranitar is a very strong Pokemon. It's a pseudo-legendary. And for those who don't know, pseudo-legendaries are Pokemon that is basically a fan term, and it means a Pokemon that has a base stat of 600 and has a 3-stage evolution and is also in the slow experience group. Tyranitar is a very strong Pokemon, as its base stat is 600. Now, of course, as with many pseudo-legendaries, Tyranitar is nerfed a little bit by its terrible, garbage, rock, dark typing, as Tyranitar has 7 weaknesses. 7. And I'm not joking, it literally has 7 weaknesses. Now I'm probably going to put it on the screen. You can probably see all the weaknesses that Tyranitar has, because I'm not wasting my breath telling you each of those weaknesses. But even without that, Tyranitar is a really big threat, as it's a really strong Pokemon, and it's also, despite its terrible typing, has seen a lot of success in competitive Pokemon. So I think it's the perfect ace Pokemon for me, and I was actually pretty surprised that it didn't get any sort of attention despite it being the pseudo-legend of Gen 2. So, as the champion, I thought that it would be perfect for me to use Tyranitar. Now, enough with the introduction, now let's get into the abilities and moveset. Now, for Tyranitar's moveset, I decided to go with Rock Slide and Crunch for stab attacks. Then, for coverage moves, I decided to go with Earthquake, and finally, Ice Fang. Now, of course, Ice Fang isn't the best move all the time, but it does help out with the grass weakness, and it does have the chance to freeze the opponent, which I thought was nice. I could also go with Dragon Claw, but I personally am a big fan of Ice Fang, because I think it's better personally, and it's going to help me out a little bit against grass types, which I think is pretty helpful. I also considered Thunder Fang, but I just like Ice Fang better, and I think it's a little bit better personally. Alright, now it's time for Tyranitar's ability. Now, Tyranitar has 2 abilities, Unnerve and the superior, in my opinion, Sandstream. For those who don't know, Sandstream creates a sandstorm every single time the user enters the battle. And the Sandstream not only does chip damage to non-rock, steel, and ground types, but it also gives a special defense boost to Tyranitar, which is already pretty good considering it has a really good special defense bulk already. So that's gonna even So so the Sandstream, I can't speak, is gonna boost it even more. So the Sandstream is definitely its best ability. Now, before we move on to our next Pokemon, I thought that Tyranitar needs a held item. Now, most champion Pokemon Ace normally have citrus berries. However, I decided that I was going to make this team as if it was a post-game team. That way, if you just want to nerf me, you could take away the held items and maybe change up the movesets a little bit. So for my held item, I've decided to go with Assault Vest. Assault Vest is a really good held item, especially for Tyranitar, because it raises the holder's special defense by 50% and also prevents the holder from selecting any status boosts for me first. And it's going to be really helpful for Tyranitar overall. Alright, that does it for Tyranitar. But as I said, Tyranitar has 7 different weaknesses. So now we need to find 5 more Pokeball to help Tyranitar counter those types. And the first Pokeball that I've decided to go with is Scizor. Is one of my favorite bug type Pokemon of all time. Scizor has one of the best types in the whole game, with Steel and Bug only having 1 weakness. Plus, Scizor helps out with the Grass and Fairy weakness that Tyranitar struggles with. As for Scizor's moveset, I've decided to go with a pretty simple moveset of Bullet Punch, X-Scissor, Dual Wing Beat, and U-Turn to switch out if things get bad. Now, I've also thought about Sword Stance or Double T, but Double T, first of all, that's just unfair, and I don't want to make my battle too difficult. And Sword Stance, I like Sword Stance, but I just thought that U-Turn would be much more helpful. And U-Turn, though, is not the strongest move. I thought that it would be just better and more helpful instead of, setting up. So I just went with U-Turn. I think it's pretty good. As for Scizor's held item, there are a lot of really good held items that it could use, but I've decided to go with Life Orb. Now, the Life Orb item is a really solid held item. The Life Orb boosts the power of the user attacking moves by 30%, but of course, to balance this out, the user loses a bit of their health every single turn. The Life Orb item is going to be really good as it boosts the power of Scizor's already pretty solid attack, and though it does lose a little bit of health, that can of course, that's not a big problem as Scizor is going to do a ton of damage. So overall, that's pretty much all about, that's all I really have to say about Scizor. As for his ability, I would go with Tactician to boost the power of Bullet Punch, so it would be 80 instead of 50. Now, Scizor and Tyranitar counter most of their weaknesses pretty well, as Scizor counters the Fairy and Grass types that Tyranitar is weak to, whereas Tyranitar counters Fire types, which is pretty solid. However, even then, Tyranitar still has more weaknesses that I need to cover with the rest of my team. And I think I've got the perfect Pokemon to do that. Because for number 3, I'm going with Houndoom. Now, Houndoom is not one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, but it does have a pretty interesting typing, and it's overall mostly used by evil teams. And though it is Karen's ace, you could say, I still think it fits really well, and I just want to use it because though it does share a dark type, being with Tyranitar, the only weakness they actually share, okay, they actually share quite a few weaknesses, but we're not gonna worry about that, as Houndoom can counter Bug and Steel types, which is a problem, and it also takes neutral damage from Fairy, which is overall pretty nice. For its moveset, I've decided to go with a pretty simple Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, Thunder Fang, and Nasty Plot to setup. So not a very complex build. I just went with the simple build. As for its item, I decided to go with Choice Specs. I think Choice Specs is probably the best item. It's not the best item for it, but I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon. It could definitely contribute a little bit of damage on my team. So yeah, that does it for Houndoom. As for its ability, I would probably go for Flash Fire, as it's probably its best ability. So yeah. So for now, my team is Assault Vest, Tyranitar, Life Orb Scizor, and Choice Specs Houndoom. Now, all 3 of them counter most of their weaknesses pretty well, but there are some types that they cannot cover. Those types being Water, Dark, and Ground. So let's try to cover these weaknesses with the rest of our team. So let's do this. First, let's begin with the Ground weakness, and to counter ground types, I've got Politoed. Now, Politoed is not one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. I think it's pretty cute, and it has a pretty solid design, but it's a really good Pokemon. Now, Politoed is a pure water type, so it only has 2 weaknesses, electric and grass. Grass, of course, is countered by Houndoom and Scizor, and then electric, Tyranitar destroys electric types, so no need to worry about that. So, overall, Politoed is a pretty solid water type. For its moveset, I've decided to go with simple moveset as well. I just have to go with Surf, Ice Beam, Psychic, and finally, Earth Power. Surf is obviously its main stab move, Ice Beam to counter grass types, Earth Power to counter electric types, and Psychic to take down poison types, and to take down poison types and fighting types. So yeah, overall pretty solid moveset. For its ability, I decided to go with Water Absorb to give me immunity to water, which is pretty solid. Drizzle is not going to help you out a lot, and Damp is just a garbage ability, so yeah. As for its item, I decided to go with Citrus Berry to give it some more survivability, and with its amazing, pretty solid bulk, it's going to help it survive a bit longer. And Citrus Berry, I haven't used it, so I think it's a pretty solid item. So yeah, let's move on to the next team member. Before I move on to the 5th member of my team, I would just like to take a moment to tell you guys to subscribe to my channel, because I've been working really hard, and even hitting that small subscribe button would really help me out. And if you hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell, you will get notified whenever I upload a new video. And with that, so I'm not going to waste any of you guys' time, so yeah, let's get back into the video. For my next team member, I've decided to go with Crobat. Now, Crobat is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and it's a really cool and sick-looking Pokemon. As for its stats, it has pretty respectable stats with blazing speed and pretty respectable attack. Now, let's move on to its moveset and ability and, held item. For its moveset, I went with the simple Venoshock, Protect, Aerial Ace, and Toxic. Venoshock is gonna double in power when the opponent's Poison, which fits really well with Toxic, Aerial Ace for Flying Stab, and Protect to stall at turns. Now, Crobat is of course a physical attacker, but its special attack isn't that bad, plus the second effects of Venoshock might help it out, get some unexpected KOs, who knows. As for its ability, I went with Infiltrator, which is going to allow me to Toxic opponents even if they set up Magic Guard or Wonder Guard. I think it's Magic Guard, and then they can then I can also ignore Reflect and Light Screen. So overall, pretty solid. As for its held item, I decided to go with Leftovers. Now, Leftovers is, I guess you could say, a pretty solid item. It restores 1/16 of the holder's maximum HP, which is pretty solid. Now, I also consider Focus Sash, but I just considered that Leftovers might be a little bit better, and it would allow Crobat to get a little bit of healing while it protects and does other things. So overall, I think that's pretty much it for Crobat. So let's move on to the final member of my champion team. For my final team member, I've decided to go with Porygon 2. Now, you may be wondering, Nura, why aren't you using Porygon Z? Well, first of all, Porygon Z was introduced in Gen 4, so I'm not allowed to use it because I set the rules. But Porygon 2 isn't that bad. Despite being a non-fully evolved Pokemon, it's actually pretty solid. And unlike Porygon Z, it's pretty bulky, has solid defenses, and only has one weakness, which is fighting, which is pretty nice. Now, for Porygon's moveset, I've decided to go with another pretty simple moveset of Tri-Attack, Shadow Ball, Recover, Thunderbolt, which is overall pretty solid. Tri-Attack for stab, Shadow Ball to take down ghost types, Recover to heal some of the damage, and Thunderbolt to take down flying, to do neutral damage to steel that resists my normal type attacks, and to take down water types as well. As for its ability, I decided to go with Trace because it's probably its best ability, and Download is unfortunately not available to Porygon in this generation, which is kind of sad. So Trace is probably our best option. As for its held item, I decided to go with Eviolite to give it some more bulk and more survivability. Now, for those who don't know what Eviolite does, Eviolite basically gives the holder 50% boost to their defenses, which is really nice. But the catch being that it only works on not fully evolved Pokemon, and since Porygon 2 is not fully evolved, it can hold the Eviolite. So yeah, so that's pretty much my whole champion team. So that is basically it for this video. As for my final team, my team is Tyranitar, Houndoom, Crobat, Porygon 2, Politoed, and Scizor. Let me know in the comments below What do you think of the team? And let me know in the comments below what your team would be if you were the Indigo Plateau Champion. That is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Uh, Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. See you later, alligators.